Hello, my name is Lukas Eberhard from Graz University of Technology. Welcome to my today's talk about narrative-driven movie recommendations on Reddit. Before I'm going to start, I want you all to imagine that you're currently in the mood for watching a movie. You do not exactly know which movie you want to watch, but you have some kind of an idea which characteristics the movie should have. Let's assume that you're in the mood for watching a thriller that is similar to the movie The Dark Knight Rises, and it should have some kind of mind-blending storyline. The first thing you're probably going to do is to check out one of your favorite streaming providers and see which recommendations you get there. But they're just based on the specific movie, The Dark Knight Rises, or on your user profile. So they do not need to be a thriller, and they also do not need to have a mind-blending storyline. So what else could you do? You could go to the Internet Movie Database, IMDb, which is a large online platform with a huge amount of information about movies and also user interactions like ratings and user reviews. And if you go to the page of The Dark Knight Rises, you will find 12 movie recommendations. But here again, they do not need to be thrillers, and they do not have they do not necessarily have mind-blending storylines. So what else could you do? You could go to Reddit, which is an online platform with lots of online communities. And one of those communities is the subreddit called Movie Suggestions, where users can request for movie recommendations in a very specific form, where they have free text requests, and then the Reddit community answers with movie suggestions. In our case, it could look like this. We go to reddit.com into the subreddit movie suggestions, submit a new post that says it's a request. We want to have thrillers similar to The Dark Knight Rises, but with a mind-fucking plot. So we submit this post, then it's there, and yeah, the next thing we gonna do is wait. Yeah, we have to wait for the community answers, which can take minutes or even hours. But I said we are in the mood for watching a movie right now. So it's time dependent, depending on which time of day it is. Also, we can't be sure about the quantity of the suggestions we get there. It can be the case that we just get 2 movie recommendations from the community that we've both already seen. Also, we can't be sure about the quality of the recommendations, since they can just be a very personal flavor. So those 4 points, those issues, were the main idea and the main motivation for us to build a narrative-driven recommender system that acts as a service for recommending movies on online platforms like Reddit by computing recommendations based on the user requests. To evaluate our recommender systems, in the end, we use existing Reddit submissions as the input, compute our recommendations, and in the end, we compare our recommendations with the one from the Reddit community and check the overlap. So the target is to some kind of imitate the community taste of the Reddit community. And with this evaluation, we can see how far we can imitate this community taste. So the first part of our recommender system is to have a structured input. But as you've seen before, the Reddit submissions are free-form narratives, as our example, which is this short text here. And so we needed to bring this into a structured form. We did this by performing a crowdsourcing experiment where we took existing Reddit submissions and asked crowd workers to tag those submissions, to tag movie titles in the submissions, to tag genres or keywords, to bring them into a structured form. And for our example, this would look like this. We would have a genre, thriller. We would have a movie, The Dark Knight Rises, and we would have the keywords mindfucking plot. At this point, I also want to tell you that we have published this data set to enable researchers to conduct independent analysis in the context of narrative-driven movie recommendations. You can find this data set on www.rbset.io/datasets. So now this structured input is the first part of our recommender system, and this is the input, and the second part are then the recommender algorithms. We implemented 5 state-of-the-art recommender algorithms, which are an item-based collaborative filtering based on user ratings from IMDb, and matrix factorization approach also based on user ratings from IMDb, a content-based filtering approach with TF-IDF where we used movie descriptions and user reviews from IMDb, an embeddings approach with doc2vec, also using movie descriptions and user reviews from IMDb, and a network-based approach where we created a bipartite graph connecting actors with movies and computed recommendations based on this network. So with those 5 algorithms, we computed so-called candidate recommendations since they are not final. And in the third part of our recommender system, we are going to refine and re-rank those candidate recommendations. So the second part are the recommender algorithms, and then the third part are the post-filtering and re-ranking. This part we've split up into 2 different experiments. The first one is we just use data from IMDb for the post-filtering and re-ranking. Especially we used ratings, genres, the years, plot keywords, predecessors, and successors for the re-ranking, which means, for example, if the more genres, for example, a movie in this candidate recommendation list has in common with the input movies, in our case, The Dark Knight Rises, the higher it gets ranked. For the second experiment, we additionally to the IMDb data use information from the target platform, in our case Reddit, in form of the narratives. We use genres, years, keywords, and actors. From our example, this would mean that we use the genre thriller and the keywords mindfucking plot, meaning that movies in the candidate list that have the keywords mindfucking plot in the movie description or the user reviews get ranked higher in this candidate recommendation list. So for all of those characteristics, we compute scores for each movie in the candidate recommendation list, and we also have different weights, because not all of those scores or all of those characteristics are equally important. And we compute the optimal weights by performing a grid search experiment. So this is now the third part of our recommender system with 2 different experiments, once just using data from IMDb and once using data from IMDb and the Reddit narratives. So the second and third part form our recommender framework, and as the fourth step, we can see the final recommendations. So this picture should give you a short overview over our recommender system. For evaluation, we use a training data set where we train our recommender algorithms on data from IMDb. For evaluation, we use 1,480 Reddit submissions brought into structured form by the crowd workers, where we use 80% for validation, meaning that we perform grid search experiments on by optimizing our hyperparameters, and a 20% holdout test set for performance evaluation. And the 80-20 split was done chronologically. So for time reasons, I just show you the F1 score results at list length 10. This line here is our baseline, our IMDb baseline, meaning that this is the performance of the very simple and default IMDb recommendations. as we have seen in the example before, the 12 recommendations for the Dark Knight Rises movie. So for our first experiment, we obtained those F1 scores, and as you can see, for all our 5 approaches, we can outperform the baseline. Those are the results when we just use IMDb data for the post-filtering and re-ranking task. And we additionally add the Reddit narratives for the post-filtering and re-ranking. We could gain a performance boost for all of our 5 approaches. The best performance were obtained with the Doc2Vec approach and the matrix factorization approach. As you can see, although the F1 scores are not that high, we are more than 2 times better than the baseline with 4 of our approaches. So the results showed that adding information from the target platform, in our case, the information of the narratives from Reddit, can gain a performance boost. So to sum up our project, we performed a crowdsourcing experiment and also published this data set. We analyzed and evaluated 5 different recommender algorithms by calculating narrative-driven recommendations and re-ranking the recommendations with post-filtering techniques. The results showed that all approaches struggled to match the human recommendations, but with all approaches we could outperform the baseline. And also for all approaches we could improve the performance when incorporating the narratives from Reddit. So for future work, we have planned to add and analyze additional post filters and also to extend existing algorithms by incorporating the narratives from Reddit already in the training phase by, for example, additional regularization terms. Also, we have planned to investigate further domains, for example, book recommendations, board game recommendations, or video game recommendations. Also, we want to perform a qualitative evaluation. You've seen our F1 scores were not that high, meaning that many of our recommendations did not match the ones from the community. But we do not know if they are really bad recommendations or if they are good, but just were not mentioned by the community. But with a qualitative evaluation, we could gain insights of how good our recommendations really are. Further, we want to implement a recommender bot to conduct further experiments on Reddit. This bot should take the Reddit submissions as input, compute recommendations, and post these recommendations on Reddit. This could look something like this, where we are on Reddit, call our bot by its name, it's rbset.io. We use this bot-specific syntax where we have G for genre thriller, M for movie The Dark Knight Rises, and K for keyword mindfuck. We post our request on Reddit, and if we then refresh the page, we can see that the bot already answered with 10 movie recommendations. So this bot is still under construction, but stay tuned, it will come soon. This brings me to an end of my presentation. I want to thank you all and again give a reminder on our published data set that you can find on our website. Thank you.
Okay, great. We have time for some questions. We have about 5 minutes for questions, so hopefully everyone had coffee and you're able to ask some. Okay, I'll ask a question and I'll give people a chance to think of other questions. So I think back on slide 8 or 9 where you showed the framework for your recommender system. There were two modes. So you have the IMDb combined with Reddit and then IMDb alone. And these things, you know, they're kind of in parallel. So, you know, this to me looks like the architecture for hybrid recommender system because you have 2 different methods. But I didn't see much detail on, you know, how they might be combined and what the benefits and drawbacks of that combination might be. So, yeah.
Okay, so this is just a very abstract and very simple picture of our architecture. And those two different experiments mean that they are not working parallel, but they are separated. So for the first experiment, we have our structured input, compute the recommendations, use just IMDb data for the re-ranking task, and then compute the final recommendation. And in the second experiment, which is separated from the first one, we also have the structured input, again compute the recommendations, the candidate recommendations, and then we use both of those data for the re-ranking task and have our final recommendations in the end. I think what your question is regarding is the combination of those two different data.
Whether there's benefit, whether you think there could be benefit, and then maybe ways that it, it could be done.
Okay, for the first, in our first experiment, we have seen that just using IMDb data, so do not use, without using data from the target platform, we can outperform the baseline. So we can gain already good results, but incorporating additionally the data from Reddit, from the target platform, we can boost the performance. So, and how we did this, we have this different scores for each of the characteristics, and we have different weights. And the optimal weights were computed with a grid search experiment, so we have our optimum weights for each of the characteristics and sum them up. And so each of the candidate recommendation in the candidate recommendation list has a final score, which then brings us to the final ranking of the recommendation.
Okay, I see.
Okay.
Thank you. So, question from Peter here.
So I just trying to figure out what is missing with IMDb, because people in IMDb may pretty much write a review which tell, oh, this movie is just like Dark Knight, by the way, the mind-fucking world. So exactly the same data might be available exactly in IMDb. And IMDb has much more of this data. So I'm puzzled why IMDb, and you told that you're looking at the reviews. Why reviews on IMDb not performing as well as Reddit, right? What is the mistake here? The same data in more of them, and it doesn't work.
Okay, so we think that the Reddit community is some kind of different than the normal people. Because if it wouldn't be the case, they would just go to IMDb, check out the recommendations, and take it. They wouldn't go to Reddit and ask for their specific requests, but they do. So they are some kind of special. So they have their special requests, which are much more detailed than just going to IMDb, where you have 12 recommendations for one movie. But as I said, they do not need to be just, they do not necessarily be thrillers, and they do not have necessarily this mind-blending storyline. So on Reddit, you have this very specific requests. So people go there and ask for very specific requests. And as our results have shown, incorporating Reddit narratives, so incorporating this information with thriller and mind-fucking plot as keywords in our re-ranking part could improve our results, meaning that for each, if we take one special request, we have more data available when incorporating data from the target platform, and so we gain better results.
Okay, thanks. We can thank the speaker one last time and move on.
Thank you.